Hello. Welcome, Stella. I'd like to. It's lovely to see you first and foremost, and thanks for carving out some time for chatting with me today. I really appreciate it. Um, for everyone that's watching, Stela Murrizi is a code model coach. I've got to know Stella a little bit over the last couple of years, and I think one of the things that I appreciate most about Stella is your willingness to just jump in and not shy away from tough conversations. And so I'm thrilled that you've again made time for this today. I wonder if we could start with you telling us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Wendy, and thank you so much for having me. I appreciate this conversation with you anytime. And what I have to say to that is it takes one to know one. So, um, so what was your question about me? So my name's Stela Murrizi. I am a code model coach, just like you. We did our certification together. I don't know. It could be a complex story, it could be very short. I am a mother to my son. I work as a coach. I have experiences that I put forth that I love creating. So these conversations light me up. I left my federal government job for a number of multiple reasons, but I worked really hard to get that job. And then I decided it wasn't working. And the reason for that is because I have an internal calling, and that calling is to have these types of conversations with women who are willing to have these types of conversations. So that's a little bit about me.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. So I noticed that like if we look on your website, and I'll put your website in any communications that you want in the link in the show notes kind of thing. Um, I noticed that you've started a decloaking and living authentically recently, and I think you might have a 1 year experience going on as well. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Absolutely. So the decloaking and living authentically experience transformed my life. There is no doubt about that. With Sheila Winter Wallace in the room and the women that showed up, that was the pivotal point that I can think of where my life went from in a particular direction that wasn't looking really good towards a whole nother direction that led me to where I am today. So all the well systems experiences, the trajectory of decloaking and living authentically, engaging and awakening others, all about family systems, and manifesting a meaningful life. The three of those combined for me, I mean, blew my reality apart. And so I am really deeply called to actually create those experiences for other women
Mhm.
and to share that wisdom really and the beautiful trajectory, because it is a very um, logical trajectory
Mhm.
when you know how the structure of thought works. I also have 2 year longs actually going on right now
Okay.
called Unapologetically Unfuckwithable, Embracing the Crone That I Am. So it is a year-long experience, because the idea is that you come and have a monthly conversation and weekly emails. And the intention is to actually connect with the powerhouse inside of us. So many women walk around feeling like we're powerless. And the truth of it is, when we know our essence, when we know our truth, when we live congruently from that truth,
Mhm.
we're really unfuckwithable. And that's the whole crone conversation. So it is linking the maiden goddess crone in a continuum and getting women to notice that we are more than just small and puny people pleasers, right? We're
Mhm.
massive, spiritual, interconnected beings of light. So how do you live as a being of light, knowing, trusting every moment that you're powerful? So
Awesome. So one of the things that I'm doing is a new program called Magic, which is basically 4 90-minute sections, and it's an acronym for manifesting authentic green dot moments with intentional choices. Green dot moments is something that I've learned about first through well systems, and really it was a chance to understand or see new things that I didn't know I didn't know. Sounds like maybe you've had a few of those green dot moments over the last little while. Can you maybe speak to some of your favorites?
favorites, sure. I mean, I have so many because I live my life from that place of intentional choice that you're speaking to. So I really quite love those two words put together. Um, So when you live, at least I can't speak for everybody, I can speak for me. Like when I started to live from a place of intentional choices, recognizing that I create my reality, everything shifted for me. So I've had a few green dot moments, and I was thinking about this before our call, and I've had them before Well Systems. And I want to speak to that because I didn't know back then what I knew now, but I knew the congruency with what I felt. So I was in an abusive relationship for about 7 years with my first partner. And I spent pretty much 5 of those years trying to leave him. So it's a very long, treacherous process. I would do one thing, like I would change houses, or I would, like do all of these different things to try and leave, and it never worked. And then one time I actually visited him in British Columbia, and I spent the week with him, and it was awful. And at the end of that week, I just remember, so I used to smoke back then, weed. So I would sit and smoke and watch the horizon. I turned my head and I noticed him flirting with another woman. And something happened in me, Wendy, and my body just went a download of sorts, or I was like, this is ridiculous. Just the fucking insanity of it all became so evident to me, and it was visceral.
Okay.
So that's the difference, is that it was so, my body awoke to something that it was trying so desperately to hang on to up until that point, but it now knew, and there was no going back. So it doesn't matter what my mind would have to say or like anything else. It was done.
And you knew.
I knew, and that was it. And that was an intentional choice. So out of my awareness, but nonetheless an intentional choice, because in that moment, my body just went, no more. Yeah. So that was then. And then post decloaking. So I was trying to decide whether or not I wanted to have a biological child in the midst of the climate collapse stuff going on. And this was before COVID. So in the midst of kind of the chaos that I saw, societal chaos necessarily unfolding, and it's intensified since then. And I spent at least a year, I think maybe even longer, trying to pros and cons it, and trying to, what should I do, and talking to everybody about it, and like trying to make these decisions that were about me. And then one day there was this awareness, again, visceral awareness, and I stayed with it. And I said, do I want to be, am I on this planet, am I here at this time to have a biological child? Yes or no? The answer was yes, and that yes flooded my body, and my body just went, let's do this. And there was nothing but excitement from that moment on. And I would never, like, that is one of the best decisions I've ever made.
That's awesome. So something that you said earlier kind of sticks with my mind in my mind as you recounted both of those instances. You talked about bringing women coming together in decloaking when they're ready. How do you know when you're ready?
That's a really good question. I know for sure that I didn't know. So I was distrustful, mistrustful, whatever the word is, of everybody. I felt so profoundly disappointed. So you got to understand, my background was, I was already a yoga therapist. I was already doing all the things, the yoga, the meditation, I'd done all the drugs. I'd done all the pathways that people say are going to lead to, salvation and enlightenment, whatever. But the problem was that I was still dying. So when I met Sheila Winter-Wallace at Statistics Canada, that faithful day, I just had a different conversation with her for 2.5 hours. So time literally flew by, and I still did not know if I could trust her, because I didn't know what it's like to trust my body. I didn't know what it's like to trust the impulse. I didn't know what it's like to actually move toward my calling. I was just, but yet I did, right? Because I actually did show up to conversations that heal, and I stayed, and I showed up to all the other conversations that she kept creating, building up to decloaking. And then by the time decloaking came around, it was so crystal clear to me. And I knew I was going to be a code model coach. And Louise was retired. So like, we literally pulled her out of retirement because I knew it was not going to happen. So how do you know? I don't know. Like, I think a lot of people get dissuaded by the excitement slash fear, right? Because
Mhm.
they're coupled together, like they're
Right.
biologically, neurologically the same. So people get a little bit uncertain, dissuaded. And the thing is that whoever's listening to this, it's like if there's a pull toward that thing. So if it's attracting you like
Mhm.
a magnet, I say go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it amazes me, as I look at my own life now, and I came to code model coaching relatively late. I was in my 50s already, which I think is a time when I look around me now seems to be a time when women really start to question. Um, and it makes me a little bit sad sometimes that I didn't discover this 30 years ago, because I can see how I move through my life differently now. And I mean, it's only time when it's time, right? Like, and you have to be, it brings to mind that saying that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. That timing piece is such a big part of it. Um, when you look back at your decision to have your son, like, I am absolutely fascinated by you, just because, again, because of your enthusiasm, and you throw yourself into things. How do you think that code model coaching makes you a different parent?
Oh my God. Oh, that gives me chills, that question, because I wasn't, wow. I am a profoundly different parent than I would have been. I was driven by guilt, and more than that, shame. I was driven by the good girl narratives that we all ascribe to, completely out of my awareness, because I also did the good girl gone bad thing, right? So totally oscillating between different worlds and not really finding my grounding. I know what I am as a quantum biological being right
Mhm.
here, right now. I know that my son knows that too, because he was conceived in that space.
Mhm.
He was conceived through this device, in this device where my neurology was not afraid, where
Mhm.
my neurology was congruent, where my neurology said, welcome. So I'm a very different person, just because then okay, so I can see when I'm going down a trajectory and I'm like, stop,
Mhm.
breathe.
Mhm.
How is this about me? So I can't say that, I've never yelled at my son, or I've never done things that I'm not proud of, because of course I have.
Mhm.
However, there's a moment of, like, I'll give you an example. Recently, with this activation of shame inside of me. So I woke up grumpy, because I wake up grumpy most of the time. And my son was like 4 o'clock in the morning, and he's like, let's go. And he's crying and he's asking for things. And I went to pick him up, but I went to pick him up pretty aggressively, which I don't do. And my husband woke up and he's like, Stella, no. So I looked at him like, what the fuck do you mean? And he's
Mhm.
like, no, absolute congruent boundary.
Mhm.
So I just stopped and I sat on the floor and I stayed with that sensation. I'm like, what is this? Because everything in me habitually wanted to fight my husband. I was like, bring it on, motherfucker. Like, it was like everything inside of me
Mhm.
just wanted to be like, how dare you?
Mhm.
But instead, I sat on the floor. I noticed all these thoughts, all these habitual responses want to come up, and
Mhm.
I did not engage. So old me would have engaged. And what kind of chaos would have created for my
Mhm.
son?
Okay.
This version of me, this congruent version of me that makes intentional choices,
Mhm.
intentionally sat down, intentionally checked in, intentionally stayed with what's presenting. I breathed, and then this word comes up of shame, right? Like this loop of internalized shame
Mhm.
that makes us feel entitled, that makes us want to fight, that makes us want to protect
Mhm.
the wrongdoing that we've already done.
Mhm.
So that didn't happen. I just stayed with it for half an hour, whatever it happened to be. And then I came back and I knew what I knew. And I apologized to my son and I apologized to my husband. Just moved on. But there was no fight and there was no guilt.
Nice feeling. Huh?
Mhm. So I can only imagine what that's like for my son to be able to see that. Like, my son's around me in intense quantum TLC moments,
Mhm.
and he's not afraid.
Mhm.
Just like looks at me, oh, hi, and then just goes on and does his own thing, because he's not afraid, because he knows that. He knows what it's like to stay and process.
And just let it happen instead of squashing it back down again.
Yes.
interesting. It's funny. Recently, I've noticed in myself, speaking of green dot moments, that I have an issue. Historically, I've had an issue with how I process anger. I didn't. I squashed it back down again, right? Like it's like good girls don't do that. We can feel it, but we don't let anybody else know about it. We don't express it, and it's caused me a tremendous preoccupation over the last few weeks because I've got this rolling around in my head, and where do I go with this, and where does it lead? Do you have anything in particular that tends to come to the surface for you that you're thinking, okay, that again, I have to just let it process?
Mm, I don't know that I have one specific example. I know that there's different tenets of similar things that show up, right? Because of the layered nature of how this all unfolds. And I've become very adept at noticing and not engaging the habit really, and really staying with what's presenting. And then there are times where I'm not. So there are times where I just kind of prance around frantically until I notice, wait a second, something's actually trying to get my attention here. So I'm not quite sure how to answer that question in this moment.
Okay.
I have had anger issues, and I've gone to anger management, and I've done the anger therapies, and the difference is that now I know there's an intelligence to that.
Mhm.
So there wouldn't be an instant when anger would come up and I'd want to shut it down or really take it out on somebody else
Mhm.
because I know that it's about me. So if I try to take it out on somebody else, then it's still about me. It's like, come back.
And that self-awareness can be, it can take a little while to get to a place where it becomes habitual, where it becomes automatic, because we've got all these other habits that we have to kind of strip away in the meantime. And I guess maybe the older we are, the more that we have, or certainly the more ingrained that they are. um, One of the things that I'm fascinated by is I really believe that everybody's got that magic inside of them, that one thing that lights them up, that makes them, everybody's special first and foremost, but makes them, it gives them the motivation to go and just do. And a lot of us don't listen to that. We
Mm.
shut down those impulses because no, I can't do that because this is what this is what's expected of me. With the people that come to you for coaching, do you see their magic right away? Do you see that it's do they see it right away?
Mm. They certainly don't.
Mhm,
Um, and then the process of staying engaged, they do. So I've definitely, so you and I met 2 years ago, and I was coaching then.
mhm,
And I'm a profoundly different coach today than I was then, because then I was still preoccupied with how do I sound to this person, and how do I look to this person, and can they hear me? And if I say it this way, so they're very much in my intellect still.
mhm,
And what has profoundly shifted, at least for me, post that first year long and post that first decloaking, is my own knowing of what I do.
mhm,
So my intention is awakening women to their essence, right? Awakening them to that being that they were born to be, right? So we're not here to play these puny games and
mhm,
whatever people do in their lives and make these messes, and that's fine, because those messes are an invitation to the greater intelligence that lives there.
mhm,
So I happen to speak to through the body, like through the body to the essence.
mhm,
So when I look at you, I don't see, like, I mean, I clearly see you physically, and
mhm,
I know what lives behind the eyes, right? Like I
mhm,
know what lives inside your being and what streams through you. And
mhm.
I trust that. And when I don't trust that, I get lost. And then I come back to trusting that inside myself so I can see it in you, because if I don't see it in myself, I can't see it in you.
Yes.
Oh, it's been a really fun journey, right? Like a journey of perpetual discovery and stepping in. So I appreciate your your comment around my stepping in, because at every step of the way when I do, immediately thereafter, what happens is, oh my God, is that right? Did I do it like this? Should I have done it like that? Is that, who's
Mhm.
going to hear it? Is anybody even going to care? Oh my God, nobody's responding immediately. Maybe I'll just take it down. Like nobody cares. So it's like all those thoughts come up. The difference now is I don't allow those thoughts to take over my intention. right? It's like
Okay.
my intention is clear and I
Yeah.
focus on that.
Mhm.
And then all of this becomes kind of like chatter in the background. And I go, great, thanks, later. What?
Okay. I like that. Because when I'm going through my day, it's like all of a sudden I'll be, oh, you're doing it again. Like you're getting all wrapped up in all these things that are going on outside. And it's really, it can be tough. There's days when it's a lot tougher than others. But I love those days when I get up and that magic happens and it's just, I know who I am today. I know when I ask myself, what am I going to do today? Who am I going to be today? The answers are right there at my fingertips. Um, and funnily enough, when I don't have those days where it flows, it's when I've gone back into those old habits. Like my favorite one has always been being so busy that there's no time to think about anything else, knocking things off of a list, right? And it's so that's what gets in the way for me. What kinds of things get in the way for you?
That's a good one. The busy one is a really good one for me. I tend to do that. I tend to start frantically cleaning. I tend to, I don't know, get distracted with, preoccupied with what's going on in the world. And then I get into this state of misery and
Mhm.
powerlessness. And the good news is that it doesn't last very long because I notice it. But
Mhm.
nonetheless, it grabs my attention and it pulls me toward it. And the worst one is when the compulsion is to want to go back to drugs. That's the hardest one for me because it's so strong.
Okay.
So and I don't. Thing is, or sometimes I have, and it's like, well, great. What was the intelligence of that? And then I discover really deeply rooted stuff that was up until that point out of my awareness. So I think we all find ways to distract ourselves. And I think that that's, it can be a healthy thing to do as far as I'm concerned, so
Mhm.
long as you notice that it's not a distraction from something else. But when you're frantic about it, right? So it's like, what's the energy brought to it? Because I
Mhm.
love my work. So I love to throw myself at my work.
Mhm.
Um, and there are times where I try to use my work to avoid something. And it's like, oh, interesting. My work's not going well because I'm not really working to work. I'm not moving towards something. I'm moving away from feeling. So, what is it that I'm not feeling? Let's just pause. So, that's the invitation for me to pause. And sometimes I use cleaning to distract myself. And I like that part. So, I'm going to keep it.
Okay. And I find that there is a genius in those distractions. And sometimes they are so useful because they'll give me some space between whatever it is that I'm trying to figure out. And then when I go back to it, it's like, oh, that's the answer. Um, I think the important part is to become aware of the fact that I'm doing it, and I am distracting myself right now because whatever is, it's just too intense, it's too much, or I need some space between me and that thing, so that when I do go back, I can look at it with fresh eyes. Because in the past, I would have just made myself busy for weeks on end, and I very cleverly burned myself out in 2016 because that's what I did. I just, okay, what do I need to, what do I do next? What do I do next? It's like the ever ready bunny, right? Just going and going and going and never stopping.
Mhm.
Um, Stella, what's the magic inside you?
Ooh, I am the magic inside me.
Great answer.
I am it. And it is me, and it is you, and it is all of us.
Mhm. I like that. I love the way that your face lights up when you are excited about something, and that enthusiasm comes across so intently. Like it's just when you engage with Stella, you're there, you're present.
Thanks, Wendy. I do say I'm like an open book, right? Like I've got nothing to hide and I want nothing to hide. It's secrets and lies are killing us. And I'm like the antithesis to that. So I want to live a meaningful, congruent life where it is unlike whatever the status quo is presenting as reasonable, right? It's like I've been there and I know that it does not work.
Mhm.
So how do we live a life that is magical? So that's what I love about well systems, right? It's the trajectory, the journey to actually the popcorn trail to the discovery
Yeah.
of what we are. Because there's a lot out there that will have, like, a moment of something and a catharsis over here and a self, awareness over here and whatever. At least for me, what I found was missing was the journey, the popcorn trail to what we are.
Yes. For me, I keep thinking about peeling back an onion, right? Peeling back the layers. And for me, I've realized that it has to happen now. If we want to live joyous lives, we have to figure out what are those things that we keep bumping up against that don't get resolved when we shove them back down.
And integrate them, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, if I'm noticing that I want to swallow something, the invitation is to open up, to regurgitate, if you will, right? It's
Yeah.
like allowing it all to move, because that's the essence of us, wants to be in flow. So if we try to shut it down and compress it, all you get is compression.
Yes.
Eventually you're going to blow up. So
Absolutely. And one of the things that I found very intriguing was you don't always have to have an explanation for what your body's processing. You just know it's done. Like I was in engaging the second time I did engaging, and I don't know what happened that day, but I was a completely different person. And that was one of the first times that I really saw a big shift in myself. And I had no words for it. I had no explanation for it, but I knew that something that was holding me back was no longer there.
So that speaks so beautifully to the logical structure of thought, right? Because first there will be the awareness, and the awareness is so massive, it's psychic intuitive, that you may not know what it is. It's got to make its way through the layers and descend, and eventually, potentially, maybe even have words. So, but that takes time. What we seem to want to do is we seem to want to go from an awareness immediately to what happened and tell the story about it. And that's not where the power lives, right? The power lives in the awareness descending and viscerally transforming the body so that we know what we know and not have to have a story about it.
Exactly.
And not have to explain it all Sunday or whatever.
And making an intentional choice in the moment.
That's all you got.
Yep. That's all we've got is in that moment. What's next for you?
What's next for me? I keep going. I have a parenting guide actually that I put up on my website today. So I have the Accelerated Evolution Guide, all about how to stay in the moment, and 10 days of journaling to discover what's easy for you and what isn't. So that's the free resource. And I added a parenting one around the power of modeling with 9 different types of questions and a whole bunch of information around modeling and invitations to breathe and invitations to notice and why this matters, why modeling matters. So that's another free guide that I created. I'm going to continue to create them. I have the monthly conversations called Igniting Your Potential. That's where anybody can show up and they're welcome to actually see what it's like to be in a well systems conversation with me as facilitator. And then there's the plethora of other intensives like the decloaking coming up. And I just started my second year long, so I think I'm going to wait till November. November will be the next one for that. And just lots going on. And of course, it's summer, so my husband's taking some time off work, and we're going to explore the area around here and just enjoy my time with my son. And yeah, that's sort of what it's like right now for me. This is where I am, and this is what I'm moving toward.
Okay, awesome. So what do you say to someone that's listening that's thinking something's not quite right in the way that I'm living my life? Where do they start?
Probably to acknowledge and validate that. So if something doesn't feel right, then take a moment inside yourself to allow that to descend to the base of your spine, to the bottom of your feet, so that you know it's true. And then you can ask yourself, now what? So if there's somebody that attracts you, there's somebody that you want to have a conversation with, there's a word, an institution, anything that comes up for you that pulls you toward that thing, I say follow it. And then, of course, if you want to come have a conversation with me or Wendy, I welcome you to do that. Oh, and Sheila Winter-Wallace, monthly conversations that heal, right? Like that's where both of us started. So it's like there's, in this paradigm, which it is a different paradigm because it demands we live from the inside out rather than from experts in.
Yes.
So in this paradigm, there's all these women to have the conversations with. So you just send an email to somebody and see what happens.
Get started.
I say follow the impulse wherever it takes you.
That's excellent advice. Stella, I want to say thank you so much again for chatting with me this morning. I really appreciate it. And any last words that you have for us?
I think this was awesome. I really appreciate being here and having this chat with you. And I love what you're doing with all the women that you've invited so far. And I look forward to what else you're going to be creating because I'm very excited about this stuff. So
thank you so much. It's nice to have you in my, and I'm going to say, use the word pack. I have that. I don't know why that word came up for me, but it did. So I'm going to use it. I'm going to trust it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
One more thing.
Okay.
Since you said the word pack, I love that. And I want to say that a lot of us are living lives with the same old people. So when I was in Narcotics Anonymous, the first thing they said is change your friends, right? Like change the environments, change your friends, change who you hang out with. And there's a reason for that. If we want to live different lives, let's say intentional lives, but we keep hanging out with people that want to drag us back into the version of us that they think they know and they want to hang on to because it feels familiar and therefore safe, we're not going to be able to evolve. Because we're going to keep looking to them for validation. So changing packs, changing the people that we have conversations with is absolutely critical because then it keeps us into a moving forward, into a moving toward rather than staying where we don't want to be. So I really, thanks for that.
Yeah, it invites new information to come in much the same way that we can't evolve in a closet, right? We can't evolve by ourselves. We need to have those conversations where we're getting new things coming in and engaging us and having us look at ourselves a little bit differently. Great way to end. Thank you for sharing your magic, Stella.
Thank you for providing the space for me to do that. And thank you for continuing to do that yourself.